Everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel SK Tech. Today we are going to discuss about one of the important topics in OOPS concept is inheritance. So what is inheritance? So inheritance is a fundamental concept in object-oriented programming that allows one class to inherit the properties and behavior of another class. It's a way of creating a new class based on the existing class, which basically promote the code reuse and help organize the code into a hierarchy manner. So basically inheritance represent a ISA relationship, which is also known as parent-child relationship. So we will discuss each and every keyword that he mentioned here, like how it is going to inherit the properties and behavior of another class to the one class to the another class. So before that, let's understand some of the important key terminology that is going to use as part of the inheritance. So first of all, in inheritance there will be always a one class. So what is class? We have already seen what is class. So class is a group of objects which have some common properties. So the common property is nothing but is like a fields, and its behavior is nothing like a behavior represent inside the class by the methods. So basically class can contain properties and behavior, or you can say variables and methods. In simple word, we always say like it is a template or a blueprint from which objects are created, right? So we have already seen what is classes and objects. Second terminology that we are going to use inside the inheritance concept is like subclass, or you can also say child class. So what is subclass? So subclass is a class which inherits the other class. That is what basically the definition of the inheritance. It is also called as a derived class or a extended class or a child class. So as a name itself is explaining what is this child class or subclass. So it is something like it is going to inherit, or it is going to extend the functionality of the another class. That other class is nothing but the parent class. So the next terminology that we are going to discuss is like what is parent class, or you can say what is superclass. So it is something like, let's say subclass means which is going to inherit the property of another class, and superclass is nothing but is the class from where the subclass inherit the features, which is also again similar to the subclass. It is also going to call as a base class, or you can say parent class. And next terminology that we are going to use inside the inheritance concept is like reusability. So basically using this inheritance concept, the advantage of using this inheritance concept is like providing the reusability. So how it is going to provide the reusability? So as the name specifies, reusability is a mechanism which facilitates you to reuse the fields and method of the existing class when you create a new class, right? So you can use them fields and methods already defined in the previous class, or you can say any other class. So these are basically some terminology that we are going to discuss, or we are going to use inside the inheritance concept, right? So let's see how we can achieve it in the Java. So this is the syntax of the inheritance. Basically there will be one class that is and then we are going to provide some class name like subclass name. Then we are going to use the extend keywords and then superclass. So here this subclass is going to inherit all the properties and behavior from the superclass. So basically it is going to extend. Basically the main advantage of using the inheritance is like extending the existing functionality already defined in some classes, or you can say reusing the existing functionality that is defined by the some classes. Some classes is nothing but the superclass. So that's why Java provided the keyword as a extend for the inheritance concept. So this is the simple syntax, like we need to provide class, then subclass name, then extends keyword, and then superclass name, and inside that it can be some methods and fields similar to the superclass or its own subclass methods and fields. So let's take an example to understand in a detail. So let's say we have an employee class which is having some functionality or some properties like salary of type float, and let's say another class is like a programmer and it's also having some property, let's say bonus of type int. So here in as a programmer, if you can see, it's a type of the employee because it is extending the employee class. So using this programmer object, you can access the variables and method inside defined in the programmer class, as well as the methods and variable defined by the employee class, because it is extending the employee class behaviors and properties. So if you take the example in the Java, something like this, you will define the employee class, define the float type of the salary, some value, and then the programmer class definition would be class, programmers, and then extends keyword, and then employee class. And let's say it's having some some property like bonus of type int and some value, right? And if you want to use the class, basically we need to create the object. So let's say we have created the main method inside the programmer itself, and then we are creating the object of the programmer. So if you can see, using the object of the programmer, we are able to access the superclass properties, right? Salary. So p dot salary, this is a valid one. And again, using the same object, we are able to access the programmer variables like p dot bonus. So here programmer is a type of employee, and he is able to access his own properties and behavior, and also the superclass behavior, which is, and why? Because it's because of the inheritance concept, that is, he is extending the employee class. So in a way we can say that these two classes relationship is like programmer is a employee. It means that programmer is a type of employee. So that's why we can say is like it's inheritance denotes like is a relationship, means programmer is a type of, or it's a kind of the employee, if the definition is defined like this. Let's move ahead and see what are the types of the inheritance in Java available. So there are, like, if you already familiar with the C++ concept, there are a couple of the inheritance available. Similar to that, Java also defines some inheritance, but some inheritance he has exclamated because of some reason. So let's see first what are the inheritance type. So basically in Java there are three types of the inheritance available. First is like single inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and hierarchical inheritance. So single inheritance, something like it will denote like there will be always at least two classes. One class is having some property and behavior, another class is who is extending or reusing the functionality of already defined in the class A. So this is how it is defined as a single inheritance. In case of multiple inheritance, at least three classes would be there. So it is similar to the single inheritance only, like class A properties and behavior is extended by the class B, and again the class B property and behavior extended by some other class, let's say class C. So this is something like it is representing multi-level inheritance. We will see an example how it is useful and where we can use it. And third types of the inheritance available in Java is like hierarchical inheritance. So hierarchical inheritance is like, let's say a class is having some functionality, and those functionality is used by multiple classes. So there will be at least two classes. There can be a multiple classes also, like class D, class E, and F. And class B is extending the functionality, or you can say it is using the functionality of the class A, and also class C is also using the functionality and behavior of the class A. So this is how it is represented as a hierarchical. And there are some couple of other inheritance available in C which is not available in Java because of some reason. So like first is when one class inherits the multiple classes, it is known as a multiple inheritance, something like this. So we have seen here like multi-level inheritance, like because one class is extending some other class, and again those classes is extended by some other class. So this represents the multi-level. But another inheritance available in C++ is like multiple inheritance. So multiple inheritance means when one class inherits the multiple classes, something like this. Let's say class C is there and it is trying to inherit the class A and class B. So this is not applicable or not valid in case of Java. And why? Because let's say class A is having method M1 and class B is also having method M1. When class C is extending, so by default all the properties and behavior, or you can say variables and methods, will be available to the class C by the compiler. So since it is extending class A and B, right, and A is also having M1 method, B is also having M1 method, so compiler will get confused like which M1 method it's make it available for class C, because it is using both the properties and behavior, right, both classes. So that is like it will give the confusion to the compiler, and because of this reason only Java does not support this multiple inheritance. But this was supported in C++ because C++ supported pointer, and using the pointer we can achieve, or we can identify, or you can say compiler can identify which of the M1 we are trying to access it. And similar to the multiple inheritance, Java also does not support hybrid inheritance, because it is also hybrid inheritance in the sense when two classes is extending the functionality of similar class, and then again these two classes has been extended by some other classes. So this is again similar to the multiple inheritance, right? Two classes is there like class A and class B extending class C. Here class B and class C functionality is extended by class D, right? So this is represent like hybrid way, and this is also it is going to give the confusion to the compiler, so that Java does not support this types of the inheritance. So this is what we have written here, like in the note section, multiple inheritance is not supported in Java through classes, but yes, this structure is supported by some other concept called interface, that we will discuss in next upcoming videos, how the multiple inheritance is achieved in Java using the interface. Okay, so let's see one by one with the help of the example, and let's revise like what are the all types of inheritance. So first inheritance we have seen like single inheritance. So what is single inheritance? Single inheritance is the simplest types of inheritance in Java. In this, a class inherits the properties from a single class, that we have seen in the diagram, right? So if you take the example in the Java code, it would be something like this. Let's say employee class is there, one class, and programmer class is extending the employee class. So basically one class is extending the another single class, and this represent the single inheritance. So if you create the object of the programmer class like this, programmer p equal to new programmer, using this programmer object you will be able to access these methods of the programmer like this, programmer.bonus, and also since it is extending the functionality or reusing the functionality of the employee class, so using the programmer object you will be able to call the employee class method also, something like p.salary. So p is nothing but the programmer type object, and using that you are able to call the employee class method. So here this p.salary it represent like call the method of superclass, right? This method is available in superclass, but using the subclass object, programmer class object, we are able to call it. And if we are writing like something p.bonus means subclass object, we are calling the method of the subclass. So this represent like calls the method of subclass. So this is how we can represent like single inheritance. Second inheritance is like multi-level inheritance, right? So similar to the single inheritance, in multi-level inheritance, what is the definition? Like in multi-level inheritance in Java, a class extend to the another class that is already extended from another class. That's what we have seen, right? Class A is extended by class B and class B is extended by class C, right? That's what it represent like multi-level inheritance. So for example, there is a class A that extend the class B, and the class B extend from another class, let's say C, then this scenario is known to follow the multi-level inheritance. So if you take in the example in the code, so let's say we have a class electronics, and which is having some constructor and some method types like device type and some implementation. Let's say we have printed something, device type something electronics. So let's say if we have another class, let's say grinder, and it's extending the functionality or reusing the functionality of the electronics type, it can represent like grinder extend electronic, and using this grinder we will be able to access the property and behavior of the electronics type as well as the grinder types variable. And again, let's say we have some other class like wet grinder, and this wet grinder is extending the functionality of grinder, right? So what is happening here? Electronics is extended by the grinder and grinder is extended by the wet grinder. So if you create the wet grinder object, you will be able to access the property and behavior of the wet grinder class as well as the grinder class, and also as well as the electronic class, because electronic class behavior and method will be available inside the grinder automatically. And since the grinder class is extended by the wet grinder, so this all property will be available here also. So if you create the object something like this, wet grinder vt equal to new wet grinder, using this wet grinder object you will be able to call this method device type, and also the category, and also the wet grinder method like grinder tech. So this is how it is represent like multi-level inheritance. So this scenario is useful. Let's say someone has defined some functionality, and similar functionality someone is going to define, and also some extra functionality. So instead of defining again same functionality, he can use or reuse the existing functionality using the inheritance concept, using this keyword extends. Again someone came, some new one, and they want to define some logic which is already defined by some other class. So again he can extend those class, like in this case wet grinder is extending the grinder object, grinder class, and he will be able to use it, and also he will be able to define its own properties and methods. So this is how we represent the multi-level inheritance. Next inheritance is available is like what we have seen, hierarchical inheritance. So what we have seen using the diagram, what is the hierarchical inheritance? Hierarchical inheritance in Java is a type of inheritance in which same class is inherited by more than one class. That's what how we have seen, right? In the other word, when several classes inherit their features from the same class, the type of inheritance is said to be hierarchical. So something like this. So let's say we have an employee class, and we have a property like salary and some value, and also we have some method like display salary. Let's say we have a requirement to define two different classes, and we want to use some existing functionality, something like display salary, right? So let's say we have defined like full-time employee. So instead of defining again the display salary here, we can reuse it since it is already available in some classes. So we have used the inheritance concept like extend employee, and then this functionality will be automatically available inside the full-time employee by the compiler, and then we can define its own functionality also, like full-time employee. Let's say we want to give the some hike of 50% or 0.5%. Similar to that, let's say we have another class, and that another class is nothing but, let's say, intern employee, and again here we want to display the salary with the some 0.25% increment. So to display functionality, since it is already available inside some classes, let's say employee class, we can use this employee class here also and define its own functionality also. So this functionality will be available inside the intern employee also, and here we have defined some logic that is specific to the intern employee, similar to the full-time employee. So what is happening? Employee class is used by full-time employee also and intern employee also. So in this way, the employee class is used by these two classes is called as, or these two classes, or you can say more than one classes, is called as hierarchical inheritance. There can be another class also who wants to use this employee class functionality. They can again define something like this. So if you print this value, how you can print it? You need to create the object. So let's say first we have created the full-time object E1 and intern type employee, let's say E2, and let's say we have printed like salary of a full-time employee before incremented, right? So if we are, since full-time employee is also extending the functionality of employee type, and just we have created the object of this full-time employee and calling the display salary, because this is already extended by this class, so it will be available, right? And again similar to the full-time employee, we have created the intern employee type E2, like EMP2, and then we are calling display salary. So this salary of the intern before incrementing, right? And then we are calling the employee like E1 incremented salary. E1 is nothing but like full-time employee. So after calling this, the salary value will be incremented, right? That's what we have seen here. What we are doing here inside the method, we are simply what are the salary available here, which is going to be available for full-time also and then intern type also. But when we call the incremented salary using this object full-time employee, we are doing some modification here, right? We are multiplying something and then adding it back to the salary. And again for intern type also we are doing something and then modifying it. So that's why when you call the even employee 1 incremented salary and employee 2 incremented salary value will be modified for specific to the employee type. And then if we print it like salary of a full-time employee after the increment using again same method, because that method is nothing but to display the salary value, like salary variable value, right? That's what it is doing here, employee salary of something. So when this method is got called, this salary value is got modified. But remember that since we are creating the different object, so this salary value will be available here, will not interfere with the object value like intern type object value, right? Both will be different instance. That's what we have seen classes and object concept in our some of the previous video. So this is how we can use one class functionality in multiple classes and define their own logic also to modify that value. But those value, like since it is available at the instance level, so if we are modifying using the even object, it will be not impacting to the employee object too. That's why we are calling different using different object dot increment salary, and then we are going to display, it is going to display the different value for both. Now that we have seen what is inheritance, what are the types of the inheritance, right, and how we can achieve it, what are the special keyword that we have seen here, extends keyword, right, for the inheritance, and what is the use. So basically the use of is nothing but the extending the functionality. So just remember that in Java everything you can relate it in the real world. That's what we have seen like in definition of the Java, right, real-time entity. It means that inheritance is also can be related with the real-time entity like parent-child relationship. So every properties and behaviors will be automatically comes to the child, and also child can define our own behavior and feature. That is what we are doing here also. Salary, if we extended by the full-time employee, all the properties and behavior will be automatically available to this class, as well as full-time employee also can define their own functionality like incremented salary. So this is the advantage of using the existing functionality. Basically we can say we are doing the code reusability. But if you see in the real-time scenario, we are saying as per the definition of the inheritance, all the features and behaviors will be automatically available to the subclasses, or you can say child classes, right? But there are something that is private in the real world also. For your parents there will be something that is private that will not be available for you or not be accessible. They will be keeping something private. Similar to that real world, in Java also not all the properties and behavior would be accessible by the child classes. So let's see what are the properties and behavior that is not accessible by the child classes or the subclasses. So first thing is like private member. So we have seen like members means nothing but the variables, right, or methods. So member means fields or methods that are declared as a private in a class are not inherited by the subclasses. They are accessible only within the class in which they are declared. So something like we have seen, right, parent class is like employee. It was defined something, it was defined like double salary. It was not defined with any specific access specifier. So if you define the access specifier as a private, that will not be accessible inside the child classes. So that is the first thing that we have seen, and that is the first thing that is not accessible by these subclasses. Second thing is like static member. So we have already seen instance variable or static members, right? So static member means that is associated with the class itself rather than instance of the class. We can only, or you can say subclasses only can inheritance which is related to the class objects, not the class label. So static member, we know that static member in the sense static field or methods are associated with the class itself rather than the instance of the class. It means that no need to create the object, we can directly call the static member. So that subclasses do not inherit the static member, they are associated with the class in which they are declared. So static member and method that is not accessible by the subclasses. Next thing is like which is not accessible is like constructor. Constructor are not inherited by subclasses. Why? Because constructor is used to create the object of the class. So it means that it is related to that class only. It will not be available to the other classes. Otherwise, it will give the ambiguity problem. So constructor are not inherited by subclasses, while a subclass implicitly call the no or constructor of its superclass if no explicit constructor is defined. But the actual constructor code is not inheritance, meaning that some constructor defined in the superclass and we want to use it. So we can call it. There is some keyword called super. Using that super keyword, we will be able to call this superclass, instance variable, constructor and all. But that we can call it, we can use it, but we cannot extend it. That is what the meaning of the constructor definition. We cannot inherit the constructor. Next thing that we cannot access is like package private members, meaning member with the default package, in the sense package private access level are not inherited by subclasses in a different package. So they are accessible only to the classes within the same package. Next point is like which is not accessible inside the subclass is like overridden method with the narrow access modifier. What is the meaning of overridden methods with the narrow access specifier or modifier? If a subclass overrides a method from its superclass and provide a narrow access modifier. Let's say overriding a public method with a protected one. So for example, a superclass having a one method which is defined as a public, and we want to override inside the subclass and we want to narrow the access specifier. So public means it is having the highest access, right? If we want to modify the highest to some lower, means narrowing the access modifier. Let's say, so narrowing the say making a default or a protected or a private itself. These kinds of things will not be accessible inside the subclass. So overridden method in the subclass will not be accessible with the broader access from the superclass references. This also we will discuss in the topic of method overloaded and method overridden. That is also achieved with the help of the inheritance only. We will see in the detail in later some point of time or some other videos. Next thing is like final members. So if a field or method is declared as a final in a class, it cannot be overridden or inherited by the subclass. Similar to the, if class is declared as a final, it cannot be extended. So this is also one important point that we need to remember, like final members or method is inside the superclass cannot be extended inside the subclass. Next thing is like which we cannot which is not accessible or inherited by its subclass is like private and default constructor. So we have already seen, right, if a class has a private or a default package private constructor, it is not directly inherited by its subclass. Subclasses must provide their own constructor. We can use it using some keyword called super, but we cannot override it or extend it. So since we have seen like we have discussed like there is some keyword called super, using the super keyword we will be able to access some members and variables and constructor, and there are so many things are there that can be accessed from the superclass to the subclass. So in the next upcoming video we are going to discuss what is super keyword and what are the uses of the super keyword. So stay tuned, we'll meet you soon. Thank you.